I'm interested in just getting right in there and tracking my character's emotions. That's really why I write, is to write these sort of emotional journeys. And I create, scene and dialogue and character and setting and plot and all these sorts of things to hold the emotion, to create, to just create a vessel for the emotion that I want to be talking about. Because I feel like every time I get an idea for a book, I know the emotion. I know the emotion of where the character is and where they're going to go.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Shop Talk with Writers, the podcast where we are curious about the stories behind the books. I'm Elena Lapin, and my wonderful guest today is best-selling and award-winning American novelist Lily King, whose most recent novel, Heart the Lover, was shortlisted for this year's Women's Prize. Lily King is also the author of 6 other novels, including Writers and Lovers and Euphoria, and the short story collection 5 Tuesdays in Winter. She lives in Portland, Maine. We were lucky to catch up with Lily King during her very busy visit to London in early June. The interview was recorded in a very unusual space at the Bloomsbury Hotel. Here's Lily King reading from her novel Heart the Lover. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Lily King, and my new novel is Heart the Lover. I'm going to read a passage that appears in the last fourth of the novel, really, and it's a flashback that the character, the narrator, is having. She's in her early 50s now, and she's remembering a moment when she was having to go to a work engagement where she's a writer and she's reading to at a university, and the professor is a writer that she's admired for a very long time. And what happens is, which does happen when you're doing something professional, your personal life sort of intrudes in ways that you don't want it to. I walked to the university and found my way to the building on my itinerary, up to the classroom where the workshop was held. A few students were already there, and I introduced myself, and we chatted about their program. Ray Hart was the last to arrive and shut the door behind him. "She's not here yet," he said, and a few of them pointed to me. "Ah, fantastic, sorry." He came over, and I stood up and we shook hands. "What a pleasure," he said. He was holding a few books, 2 of them mine, in a way that boys in college held them, against his hip. He wore old corduroys with little ridges worn off at the butt. Everything reminded me of the college boy in his short story, even though he was over 60 now. He offered me the high-backed chair at the head of the seminar table that was clearly meant for him. And I said I was fine where I was. He smiled and took his place, and I could tell the students liked him, that he created an easy atmosphere in that room. He began by saying he was grateful I was there, that he had admired my work since my first novel. He held up my most recent novel and said it was one of the most astonishing things he'd read in years. His words made my chest burn. I assigned this book to this class 2 weeks ago, and my inbox has been full of something I'm not used to receiving, thank you notes. From these kids right here. Several confessed they'd never finished a book I assigned before this one. So, you have a captive audience for whatever nuggets of gold they can get out of you. He smiled warmly at me. I was stunned by his unexpected praise. We'd had no contact before this moment. I'd been invited by a committee, and all my interactions had been with an administrative assistant. I didn't know he'd read a book of mine, and he had no idea of my attachment to his work. I thanked him, my voice weakened by a swift clustering of feeling. And I tried to tell the story of discovering his work in college. But what came to mind was the photocopied pages beneath the back door of the breach, and Yash in the tree with my boys, all of them strong and healthy then, and Yash on the phone, upset by his books. I couldn't tamp it all down. It got away from me so quickly. I began to cry at that seminar table, and I could not stop. Ray Hart looked at me with horror, and I could not explain about Jack, about Yash, about my love for Ray's work, and the great surprise of his kindness about mine, which I had all but given up on since Jack got sick. I kept holding up my hand, trying to reassure them I would collect myself in a moment. I did eventually regain a bit of composure. To try to explain would unleash another episode, so I fell back on routine sentences about my novels and my process. I showed them the spiral notebooks with my first drafts written in pencil, and I answered their questions as best I could. After the class, Ray Hart assigned a student to walk me over to the hall where I'd been speaking. When he introduced me on stage an hour later, I didn't feel the warmth he'd had earlier for my work, but perhaps by then my shame was distorting things. At the dinner afterward, we sat on opposite ends of the table, and I had to excuse myself before dessert to make the drive back to Maine. In the car, I told myself I would write him to explain and apologize, but I never did. Once I got back on the highway, I wanted to call Yash again and tell him what a fiasco it had been, meeting Ray Hart. But it was late, and I did not want him to know by telling him about all the crying at the seminar table that I knew he was dying.
Lily King, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Reading. Welcome to Shop Talk with Writers. We are recording this in a very strange space, somewhere in the middle of the Bloomsbury Hotel where you are staying, because you are very busy these days talking about this very book, Heart the Lover, which has been shortlisted for the Women's Prize 2026, and we don't know what will happen in a few days, but right now you're shortlisted and you're giving lots of interviews. So thank you so much for finding the time to speak to us as well. I have to describe this space. You know what? You describe this space. Where are we? It's an amazing space.
We're in a courtyard-ish,
Yeah.
although we're not on the ground floor. We're sort of suspended on a little porch.
Yes.
And it goes up about 6 floors, and my room is probably right there.
Oh, you can see your room.
Possibly.
Oh, wow.
It's a beautiful hotel, and we're on sort of like little French bistro chairs.
And in hotels, do you ever imagine what goes on behind those windows and doors?
Yes, sometimes. I haven't since I've been here, I have to say, but I did read a short history of the hotel that they have published and put in my room. So it used to be a YWCA in 1929 it was built. And it has a long history and has a wonderful history of being sort of a shelter and a hospital during World War II.
Just to begin with, how do you feel about being celebrated as a shortlistee about this book?
Oh, well, the Women's Prize is really a prize I've had my eye on, not for me winning it, but because I keep my eye on it because I get such good book recommendations from it. I mean, all of my favorite writers are on those lists every year. And so it was such a shock and such an honor to be on the list this year. I still can't quite believe it. And it's so wonderful to have an excuse to come to London. And I love it.
Well, we are rooting for you.
Thank you.
The passage that you just read, I chose it because it has something of both life and writing in it, which I feel this novel is kind of all about. Writing and life. One gets in the way of the other all the time. And that really shows in that passage that you've read, because here she is, she's already an author, she's being invited to speak about her work, but she's being invited by a writer, an older writer who she admired and whose stories, since her very young years, since she was a student, and that particular story of his that she refers to played a huge role in her relationship with a young man. she really wanted him to love it as much as she did. She loved it for reasons that he couldn't see at the time. And so here she is, and she is, as you've just read, she falls apart because life and writing collide in that scene. How is that balance for you, life and writing? And why do you write about that so much?
Well, it's just, I feel like it's part and parcel of being a writer. You know, of course you couldn't write without your life experiences, but there's no cordoning off your life experiences when you're sent off on a book tour, or when you're asked to visit, you know, a college classroom. And it just seemed an opportunity, this little tiny memory that she had of the way so many parts of her life had kind of collided at the same time. She had spoken to Yash on the way down, and then of course they had the long history of this writer that of course the writer has no idea, you know, that there's just these layers. And then I think we've all experienced that moment of someone being very kind, and it just opens you up in this way. You're trying to contain, and then there's this kindness, and you just can't hold it in anymore. And I don't know. It's writing is such a exercise in learning how to compartmentalize the rest of your life so you can write. But then once you do write, you're sent off, you know, if you're lucky, you're sent off and to talk about it, and you try to compartmentalize some more, and it's challenging.
What's very, very interesting is how the minute he begins by praising her, which touches her deeply, of course.
And throws her off guard.
But then the minute she falls apart and shows her real emotions, he rejects her. He can't handle that. He distances himself from her.
He's bewildered. I mean, I think he doesn't know what is happening, and of course she can't tell him.
Do you think that also touches on a very deep difference between male and female writers?
I don't know. There are moments in this book where I'm definitely aware of those differences, and certainly, you know, I have a female narrator, and she is navigating a patriarchy. And I do think that had that writer been a woman, it would have unfolded very differently. Very differently. I mean, it's hard not to imagine a woman saying, "What's wrong?" in some way.
Or actually finding it particularly interesting. A writer crying, what are you crying about? What is causing you that emotion? Just to explain what I meant by what I just said, I find that male writers write no matter what. My brother's a writer. He gets up in the morning, and no matter what, you know, our parents died, he just kept writing the next day.
Yeah.
When something happens in my life, unfortunately, I think it's better the way men do it. I admire it. But when something happens to me, I stop. I have to wait till I'm ready again. And I think women process what's happened to them, and then they wait, and then eventually they're ready. So that actually comes through in your earlier novel, Lovers and Writers, where perhaps the same protagonist is in a situation where she is older, writing, not that much older, but a certain amount older. She's already trying to specifically finish her first novel, and she's very committed to that, and she's still jobbing and so on, and having a life all around that. But that novel is the heart of her life at that point. But she had to be ready for it. She's lost her mother at that point. I'm talking about a different novel, not about Heart the Lover. She's lost her mother, and she's recovering from that. So I find that your protagonist in both of these books is constantly recovering from something, whether it be something big like the death of a parent or her parents' divorce, or just a moment with someone who said something to her that rubbed her wrong or that disappointed her. And the reason I think she's recovering a lot is because she doesn't really react in the moment. She internalizes her reactions, and that stuff that she internalizes, that she thinks about and feels, that then finds its way into how you write. And I just want to add that you write in the present tense. I hate when novelists write in the present tense, but not you. I love the way you write in the present tense.
Thank you.
So, is there a connection between writing in the present tense and how you want to express what goes on under the surface?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, present tense gives you immediacy, and it, you hope that it brings the reader kind of right into the moment. But I think really I use it in these two books anyway. I use it for myself, so I can be right there, and it's not through the lens of time. I'm not, trying to shade it with all different layers of time that have passed since that event. Like, we're right there, and so you feel like the blows that she experiences, and yes, you feel the way she's a little numb at first. That's kind of her way of coping, is to kind of numb out. Like, you the reader can be kind of more shocked by what is happening or what is said to her than even she is, and she's just sort of, but then it festers. and I don't know, I'm interested in just getting right in there and tracking my character's emotions. That's really why I write, is to write these sort of emotional journeys. And I create, scene and dialogue and character and setting and plot and all these sorts of things to hold the emotion, to create, to just create a vessel for the emotion that I want to be talking about. Because I feel like every time I get a idea for a book, I know the emotion. I know the emotion of where the character is and where they're going to go, where I want them to end up. Okay, I can feel that trajectory, and then I have to put in all the pieces to sort of support that.
So your initial feeling for the book about to be born is an emotion? Can you describe that a little bit more in connection with Heart the Lover?
Well, I did know the situation too. With Heart the Lover, I knew that I was going to have a main character in a room in her early 50s, and that she was going to be full of conflicting feelings about someone who was dying. And that's what I wanted to write about. That's why I started writing this book, is just, I don't know. I had been in a lot of hospital rooms from 19 to 22. And they have a particular feel and there's so much going on. And so it was almost like just a cacophony of emotions that I wanted to capture. And I knew that's where the book was going to land. And then I had to start at the beginning with another set of emotions to get there.
And how did that emotional kind of beginning connect with the previous book in your mind, in your novelist mind?
I didn't know that there was any connection.
You didn't think?
Not when I started writing these first chapters or these first pages. And then I took a note in the back of a notebook, and I meant to write, her husband, blah, blah, blah. Instead of writing her husband, I wrote a proper name. And I was like, she's married to him? It kind of blew my head off. And then I sat with that for a while. I really had no idea if I was going to keep that. It just seemed absurd. I've never, ever, ever, ever returned to a character before, ever. And I mean, I honestly feel like they are utterly dead to me. So it was a big surprise.
The reason that's very interesting is because one can read Heart the Lover as is without having read the other
Writers
book.
and Lovers.
But I read Writers and Lovers. I read it after reading Heart the Lover.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I found that really interesting because it made me think about what I felt while reading Heart the Lover. I love the freedom you gave yourself to kind of jump from one time frame to another without over-explaining what might be missing or there but not explained in between those two parts. I loved that. And I love how you write about, love. One of my favorite bits is at the end of Heart the Lover when her son, Jack, is expressing interest in, or discussing, how old is he, 12?
Yeah, I think so.
12. He's talking about his friend wants him to be in a throuple.
Yes.
With another girl that they both are very interested in. And in fact, that is a reference to her own life, love life. She has always been.
That's true.
In a throuple. And that made me think.
And yeah, that is funny. I don't know how conscious that was. I loved that he wanted to talk to her about whether he should be in a throuple or not, and just it shows so really like how far we've come too. I mean, here she was like all in a love triangle and all fraught, and now it's like there's a word for it, and I don't know, society is still opening.
Lily King, another thing you do extremely well, annoyingly well, you played with my emotions like, wow. At the end, I was absolutely weeping. Were you when you wrote it?
No.
Okay. You don't have to.
I mean, when I was writing that last section, it was an extreme sort of heaviness in my heart, but it wasn't a cathartic cry. It was more of a weight that I carried around while I was writing it. But I will say, when I was revising, I had to I rewrote at the very last minute the third part, and the conversation with Yash at the very end. I was writing on such a quick deadline, and I had introduced this secret that hadn't existed before, and I was kind of writing in real time, his response to what she was telling him, and I had no idea what he was going to say. And then when he said the thing, that made me cry. I remember writing it and having a tear in my eye, and so that was the one time where I really did cry.
Well, I didn't have a tear in my eye. I was literally weeping. And the thing that you do so incredibly well is you make these characters so very real that you make the reader hate them when appropriate. There were moments when I absolutely hated Sam. I wanted to kick him for all sorts of things that he did and said and how he behaved. I loved how you show these two different kinds of love. The love for Yash is the person that he is. How you made him so alive to everyone around him, particularly children. The way he connects it with children.
Yeah, that's true.
But let's talk about those different kinds of love, because your protagonist, even let's just assume that these two books are somewhat connected. She's had a lot of relationships.
Yeah.
With very different men.
Yeah.
What would you say is the one thing she is always looking for?
Well, I think she's always looking for a home. I think she's looking, I think that's why she loved walking why I really loved writing the house, but she needed the house. And that, I think that is a huge component of the attraction to these two men, is this place and this home, where she can kind of feel a part of something. And I think, since her family kind of fell apart, or even before, I mean, her parents had a terrible marriage from the beginning. I think she's really wanted a home, and not just like to feel safe, but to feel joy and to feel happiness, and again, a part of something. I mean, I think the title, Heart the Lover, it really is about all the ways in which the heart loves. And so it's not just men. I mean, she has a big heart, and she obviously loves her children, and then she learns to love Yash in a completely different way, that's not as a lover, but as a dear, dear friend. And then, of course, Sam and Yash, it's really a love story between them too, just a profound, kind of essential friendship.
Yes, friendship is love.
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly.
And I think we've become quite sort of conditioned to think that love is just one love per lifetime. You find the one and that's it. But actually, it's ongoing, it's constant, it's very open. You find different things in different people.
Exactly.
And she gives herself the freedom to experience that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I wanted to mention was on page 189. Can I just read that bit to you? You know how you can remember exactly when and where you read certain books. A great novel, a truly great one, not only captures a particular fictional experience, it alters and intensifies the way you experience your own life while you're reading it, and it preserves it like a time capsule. Possibly my favorite kind of insight in this book, because things happen because of the books we read. So, by the way, this book is full of real suggestions as to what to read, because you name so many authors, old books, because she's a student, she's encountering things. I looked it all up. I've had a lot of fun with that. And how important is your relationship to you with your readers? Do you think about them when you write? Are you interested in what they think?
When I start writing a book, I don't believe that it will be published. I mean, I don't have any confidence
any book
in it. No.
Even
I mean,
now?
I'm just dabbling around. I'm just trying things out. I'm hoping that it's going to be a novel, but I don't. There's always a point in the first draft, usually 2/3 of the way through, where it's a disaster and I think I should give up, and I tell my husband I've got to abandon the book, and he's like, you always say that. And I said, no, this time it's different. He says, you always say that. So, and I eventually, I keep going and I finish it. So I am not thinking about readers. I'm barely able to be a reader myself. I'm so disappointed that I can't seem to pull it all together. And then when I do finally get to the end and I feel like, okay, I do have something to work with here. I think I can make it into something that at least my editor will see. Then I start thinking about her, Elizabeth Schmitz. And then I maybe start thinking about my across the street neighbor, Lisa Adams, who I often say is the reader I write for. Because she's not a writer, she's not an editor. She's trained as a lawyer, and she's just a voracious reader who has exactly my taste, And so I can really trust her.
And so, she's honest. She'll tell you the real truth.
Yes, and I do think of like wanting to write a book that she likes. And then with each draft, I start to accept that really there might be readers, and then that makes me have to think, like, will readers understand this, Or is it just Elizabeth, my editor, and I who understand this? I don't like to over-explain. I really like to under-explain.
Yeah.
But there are times when I realize, okay, I have to put in a little bit more here to help the reader along. And so that's when I start to think about readers, is just,
But not initially.
Not initially.
No. So very intriguingly, you brought your notebook. Is this actually the manuscript of Heart the Lover?
Yes.
This is what will end up in a Texas
computer. Yes,
archive.
I will have.
No, I meant in an archive of your work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody's knocking down my door for that. That's for sure. But yeah, I write them in these spiral notebooks that I buy at Staples. There is a little pen in here. I must not have had a pencil for a day, but I really have to write with a pencil. I don't cross anything out. I cross things out. I don't erase.
I see.
And then eventually, when I kind of lose the thread, I'll put sections on the computer. And that's kind of its own little revision process. But I have to write everything first in my notebooks. So this is notebook 2 of Heart the Lover. And then in the very back of the book, I keep notes. I get ideas as I write.
I see drawings.
Yeah.
What's
I
that?
don't know what that is. It says, black hair, long, and dark eyes, long lashes, funny, fast, happy. I think that must be Yash. And then it said copper-colored hair, and this must be Sam. Copper-colored hair, green eyes, long lashes, tall, awkward, slow.
So when you draw it, that helps you to describe it.
I guess. This is, it's so funny. I mostly think of Yash with a ponytail, so I don't think of his hair as being all wild like that. But he does pull it out of the ponytail when she first meets him. Yeah, and then I had this idea that I was draw a triangle. I had this idea of the delta terminal and this word delta being 3, and maybe I would call it delta, which would have been a terrible title. But and so anyway, in the back of my thing, I put notes, and then when my notes get too crazy, I make a little timeline. So this is a timeline for the end of the book.
Okay.
And it's just tiny little moments, like they're not chapters or anything like that. But I draw a line across the lengthwise across a page.
And did you always work like that? Is this the way you wrote your very first book?
I don't think I had a timeline for my first book. I'm not sure. I can't quite remember.
But you also wrote in pencil.
But I've written every single book exactly the same way. Oh, I have notebooks for every single book. This is the only way I can write.
So I'm very interested. What happens between that, the handwritten manuscript in a notebook, and the typed one on the computer?
I type as I go, or sometimes I write a whole notebook and then I have to type it all, and that takes months because I'm very slow. But when I finally get everything onto a file, then I clean it up as best I can and I print it out. I really can't read anything on the computer. I just want to print it out as fast as I can. And then I try to take a break of a week or 2, but usually it's just a couple of days, and then I start reading it and I start marking it up. And I just edit it. I mark it up with a pen or a pencil on the manuscript, and then I put all the changes back in the computer, and then I print it out. I do the same thing. I do it over and over, 6, 7, 8 times. And then finally I'll give it to my husband, my writer's group, my agent, and my editor.
Your writer's group? You have a group?
I have a writer's group, yeah. There are 4 of us.
And they all write similar thing? Novels?
One is YA mostly, and the other writes adult novels. But they're great. They're incredibly good readers. They give me a much more scathing reviews than the New York Times ever would.
In this novel, Heart the Lover, the earlier time is pre-mobile phones and pre-computers, really, pre-all internet. There are no phones. Phone calls are made, in a certain old-fashioned way from a phone with an actual phone. In the last bit, it's all about mobile phones. Everyone's communicating via text messages.
That's true. You're the first person who's noticed that.
And there's a big difference. It does seem slower by comparison to the other one. In the other one, in the second half, so much goes on, but because of these devices, your characters can communicate certain things much quicker.
Yeah.
And they don't have to wait.
Yeah, no, it's very
But
true.
in the first half, we're in the 80s, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah,
87.
in the 80s. I remember that time. You had to wait. And there
Yeah.
were love letters.
Yeah.
I don't know that there would be any love letters nowadays.
I know.
I've actually discussed that with my daughter. I said I found my parents' love letters, which were very passionate, very erotic, sometimes even angry.
Wow.
And then she said, I've never had a love letter. So I don't think it's a concept for today's generation to actually have love letters. You know, you will exchange loving messages and maybe
Yes, no,
but you
it's
don't
very
actually
true.
have a love letter. So your protagonist covers that whole trajectory of pre and post internet communications. And there is a difference.
Yeah.
Do you think so?
I do. I mean, I also think that they're young and they don't have as much responsibility, and so it's just kind of a slower time of life, possibly. But
Yeah.
but honestly, if they had phones, it wouldn't maybe seem so slow.
Finally, can I ask you one last question, which is the last question I always ask of all our guests, which is, why do you write?
It's such a good question. I ask it too when I interview writers. I love it. It's harder to answer than to ask, I will say. I think that I write to find out how I feel. It's not so much what I think, but how I feel, and to get it up and out of me in this way that really only writing can provide.
Lily King, thank you so much for this conversation with Shop Talk with Writers.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was Shop Talk with Writers. Our guest on this episode was American novelist Lily King. Her novel, Heart the Lover, is published by Canongate. Read my feature about this conversation and about reading Lily King on my Substack, and follow us on Instagram for more, including photos of Lily King's handwritten manuscript. Let us know your thoughts and comments wherever you choose to listen to this podcast. Coming up next, great conversations with authors Lucy Caldwell, Claire Fuller, and more. I'm Elena Lapin. Thank you for listening.